On your Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, it's a veritable smorgasbord of Raptors-related stuff. We'll talk about an upcoming rotation crunch, the mobility of the team within the Eastern Conference, and Toronto tempo?
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, December the 5th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find me on Blue Sky, shows on Instagram. You can join the Locked On Raptors Discord server, link in the description of the podcast. And of course, you can go and subscribe to the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter. It's free. It's easy. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a QR code on the screen to click through to go subscribe. If not, you can go to the description of the podcast, find the link, and subscribe through there. It's very helpful. It makes me feel good. And there's original writing from me in there 5 days a week for the low price of On the House. So please go do that. Support my work and make me feel good in the process. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started, and we'll get started here on your Thursday edition of the show. A bit of a grab bag today. There's lots of stuff going on. The Raptors start a 3-game gauntlet tonight against the Thunder, the Mavericks, and the Knicks. We'll talk a bit about that, what the arrival of hopefully Gradey Dick into the lineup tonight means for, what the rotation is going to look like. There's a crunch coming. Bruce Brown not far off either, it seems, and we'll get into sort of what's going to happen to the Raptors rotation from that. We are also going to take a look at the Eastern Conference, because it seems like the Raptors are going to be much higher in the standings than they are right now by the end of the season. We'll break down why that is and run through the just the gauntlet of terrible teams that is laying in front of them in the standings right now. Plus, Toronto Tempo, the WNBA team, announced its name and logo. Mixed reviews, to say the least. So I'll give you my sort of full rundown of my thoughts. I like maroon. Maroon's cool. The rest of it, we'll see. But let's get started here with the rotation crunch. Again, lots of stuff to kind of get into. Bits, bobs, odds, and stray musings. And I think the rotation stuff is pretty interesting right now. Again, big 3-game stretch tonight against OKC, Dallas, and the Knicks kicking off. And look, all home games. The Raptors have been very good at home, 6-4, on a great run of form right now, 5-3 in their last 8, 4-3 since Scotty Barnes got back. They are top half of the league in both offense and defense in those 7 games since Scotty Barnes got back. And this is really the first sort of, measuring stick game against a real contender they've had since that Celtics heartbreaking loss a couple weeks ago. They beat the Wolves. That was great. I don't think the Wolves are really contenders right now with how they're constructed, how they ruined their basketball team with that trade. Obviously they beat the Pacers, they beat the Heat. There have been lots of good things along the way, but this will be the first time since that Boston game where we really get to see, all right, what is this team actually made of when it comes to going toe-to-toe with the league's best? And a guy who could help them out tonight, if he's back in the lineup, he's questionable right now, is Gradey Dick. I'm still unsure as to sort of what we're going to see. Darko Rajakovic before the game Tuesday said they wanted to see Gradey Dick kind of at live speed before saying, okay, green light, go ahead, get into a game. They didn't practice on Wednesday. Maybe shoot around on Thursday is where they'll kind of gauge where he's at. Maybe they'll just look at him in warm-ups. Maybe the extra couple of days of rest is all he needed and he's ready to go. But still, I think up in the air as to whether or not Gradey Dick will be back. What that means when he does come back for the rotation is a constantly interesting question with this team, because obviously they've had new guys kind of coming in and out all season long with the injuries they've dealt with, guys emerging as legitimately viable players in an NBA rotation. And with every guy who comes back, it's probably going to squeeze someone, maybe 2 guys. And I think it's really fascinating to sort of look at this problem that we did not think the Raptors were going to be dealing with at the start of the season, where it felt like they just did not have workable functional depth. We talked about this earlier in the week. I think the single best thing about the start of the season has been the emergence of actual functional depth that makes you have to make decisions if you're Darko Rajakovic about who's going to play and who's going to play with who and who's going to end up on the outside looking in. And with Gradey Dick coming back, I mean, the starting lineup question's pretty easy with him, right? Jacoby Walter's been fun. He's been additive. The lineup that he's been part of is like a plus 22 per 100 possessions when he starts. They've been blowing teams away. He's been great, but Gradey Dick is going to assume that role from Jacoby Walter, you would think, once he gets back in the lineup. And I have very high hopes for the Barnes, Barrett, Dick, Abaji, Pirtle lineup. I think, they barely played together this season. I think they have like a slight negative in like a handful of possessions on the floor together. I'm excited to see what they're able to do just with this sort of spacing environment that Gradey Dick is going to be able to provide in a way that nobody on the team is able to do outside of maybe Immanuel Quickley. We haven't seen Immanuel Quickley, obviously. But I think with Ochai Agbaji being this so reliable and trustworthy wing who's knocking in threes and defending at a high level, I think the ecosystem for that lineup could be pretty damn impressive. And I think Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett kind of as these dueling forces of driving and kicking and dump offs and finishing at the rim and causing panic and drawing help. That's going to be a really fun, functional lineup. What does that mean for the rest of the rotation, though? When Jacoby Walter gets knocked down, what happens? We might have a bit of an inkling from the G League activity today. Raptors play very soon after I'm recording this show. They play a morning game at Scotiabank Arena. Jamison Battle and all the other guys are active for that. It seems like Battle's been ruled out for this game tonight against the Thunder as as a G League assignment. And makes sense. He's especially if Gradey Dick is coming back, if he's available. Maybe that, again, tips the hand that Gradey will be available because all of a sudden the shooting from Jamison Battle is not so much of a necessity to have. It's a luxury that you can live without for a night if Gradey Dick is getting back into the mix of things. But, what that means for sort of the longer-term rotation, I think is pretty interesting beyond just tonight. I do think Jamal Shed is probably the guy who gets squeezed the quickest here. Even with Jamison Battle being on the two-way, I think his shooting is still just so valuable, and just the ability to just drop him into a lineup if things are a little bit sticky. The Raptors bench lineups have been pretty bad on offense. They've been better defensively. They've been really good defensively. But on offense, there's still just like the need for a little bit of life and breath, and Jamison Battle brings that. So I wonder if, it's sort of a, hey, you can't have too much shooting type of thing. And eventually Jamal Shed's the guy who sort of takes a longer turn with the 905. His minutes have been kind of waning. He's been playing in first halves and not really playing in second halves of late. 7-10 minutes a game, kind of what he's been, topping out at. Maybe this is the time when Gradey Dick comes back. You have Davion Mitchell as your backup guard. You've got Barnes running the show with the starting lineup. Maybe that is just enough to say, all right, it's time for Jamal Shed to go cook with Ulrich Champche in the G League and help that development process along, with kind of working on his own. He keeps on making me want to keep on seeing Jamal Shed play because he keeps on hitting all the threes he's taking and hitting stuff off the bounce and stuff like that. That's been super fun. But I think in the grand scheme of things, yeah, that's probably the move. What happens when Bruce Brown comes back, though? Because that's the next sort of domino to fall here in the rotation Tetris that Darko Rajakovic is going to have to play. It seems like Bruce Brown's going to be back relatively soon. He's still working up to conditioning and all of that. But, he spoke last week to the media. There have been no signs of setback. When Darko talked about him on Tuesday, he didn't have any sort of concern or worry in his voice. There was no reading between the lines with what he was saying about Brown. It was just casual. Yeah, he's just working on his conditioning. He's getting back up, which makes sense. He's not played in like 6 months. He's had basically a knee injury the entire time, between the summer and then the setback in the summer and the surgery and the recovery from the surgery. They're also not like a situation where they need to rush him back because they're dying for players. All of a sudden, they've got real rotational depth. And so they got the luxury of taking it slow here with Bruce Brown, but he will be back eventually. And what that means for the down ballot guys on the team, I think is pretty interesting. It's this sort of juggling act, right? Where, I don't want to see, say, Jonathan Mobo lose his rotation time because Jonathan Mobo's been like essential to the Raptors defense when he's been out there. The combination of him and Scotty Barnes as like a 4-5 front court has been dynamite defensively. And there's a lot of chemistry seemingly burgeoning between those two guys on both ends of the floor. I mean, that's the power of friendship, baby. You know where your buddy's going to be. You know where your buddy's standing. You know where your buddy likes the ball. The chemistry is going to come easy for a guy you've been playing with since you were 5 years old. I don't think Jonathan Mobo has done anything to lose his rotation gig. I think even Jacoby Walter, again, he might be a guy who's served by some good G League time. But, before the game Tuesday as well, Darko was asked about sort of the idea of different tracks and different sort of pathways for guys. Gradey Dick, as an example, last year, the G League was a big help for him. And Darko seemed to kind of be of the mind that it's kind of a case-by-case thing, right? Where each guy, getting NBA reps is super valuable. There's a lot of utility to getting thrown to the fire, as it were. And I do wonder if Jacoby Walter, even when Bruce Brown comes back, should still be in the mix just as a guy who injects some spacing, a guy who has, a little bit of juice with the ball in his hands for a second unit that really needs it. I think there's room for him to play along with Bruce Brown. Davion Mitchell, obviously, he's probably not going to keep getting high 20s minutes every night once these guys start to come back. He'll probably be more sort of high teens, low 20s, which is fine. Certain matchups, certainly, they'll toss him in to throw on a guard who's cooking you, and he'll rack up the minutes that way. But I do think we're going to see his minutes come down a little bit. I think Bruce Brown has to play, though, is the thing, right? This is not a situation where you're just going to let him come back and, ride the pine as a DNP-CD every game. Like, you need to figure out what he can do for you. And more importantly, you need to show other teams like, hey, look, Bruce Brown, he's healthy. Look at the knee. See the knee? It's good. You want to trade for him? There's a showcase element to Bruce Brown that's there. And so I think where I land is, I think Chris Boucher is probably the guy I would excise from the rotation once Bruce Brown comes back. I think he's just, look, he's been fun. The highs have been really high. The lows have also been really low. And the perimeter defense metrics paint him as kind of a disaster. He obviously gets dog walked a lot when he's out on the perimeter and just like leaves his feet like with reckless abandon and not the good kind. It's tough stuff with Chris Boucher. And he's not someone you're really showcasing for a trade either, right? There's no contender out there going, Chris Boucher, the guy that we can count on to be good once every 3 games, and the other ones are going to be a mess. Like, we got to go get that guy as the final piece of our contention puzzle. That's not going to be a thing with Chris Boucher. It might be a thing with Bruce Brown, considering he has the track record of being a final piece of a contention puzzle in the last couple of seasons. And so if it's down to the 2, I'm probably playing Bruce Brown. If it's like a Chris Boucher versus Jonathan Mobo thing, I'm playing Jonathan Mobo all day long. These questions will get more interesting even as Immanuel Quickley comes back, and even Kelly Olynyk. There's still 3-4 rotation players not in the lineup for this team that feels kind of deep. It's nuts. Not what I expected. Not on my bingo card to start the year. And I do think, kind of a last thought on this, the rotation crunch that's coming. I think these next games with Gradey Dick back before Immanuel Quickley returns, they're going to be pretty telling. It's going to maybe be a bit of an audition for both Gradey and Ochai Agbaji as to who hangs on to his starting job once Quickley comes back. There's arguments for both, right? If Quickley comes back and you just want to go full offense, Ochai comes out, goes to the bench. Gradey Dick is in there as sort of the presumed starting 5 that you had coming into the year, and they probably go and rip off, 120 points per 100 possessions on offense. The defense, we'll see. Scotty Barnes makes things easier because Scotty Barnes is ruining everyone's lives on defense right now, and it's great. I do wonder, though, if, Gradey in a lesser role where he's not being asked to take the 20 shots he was taking a game earlier in the year. He's more taking 11 or 12, and he's more of this sort of off-ball gravity force that's making things easier for everyone else and not necessarily emptying the clip himself. Maybe the defense thing with him gets a little bit more amplified, and Ochai Agbaji's defense becomes more sort of what you want in there as the other guy in that 5-man group. It's interesting. I have no real sort of firm take on it just yet. I think we'll have to see how things transpire over the course of the next few weeks until Quickley can come back. But again, one of them good problems. Talking about rotation crunches was not a thing I thought we'd be doing coming into the year. And boy, am I glad that we are. When you're a really deep team too, turns out winning games comes a lot easier to you, especially in the regular season. That's where we're going to go next. The Eastern Conference. It's not good. There are a lot of bad teams ahead of the Raptors, behind the Raptors. The Raptors are also, by definition, at 7-15, a bad team. But are they the least bad of the bad teams? We're going to get into their ability to move up the Eastern Conference and what their ceiling might be within the East coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is sponsored by Chime. We've all been there, spending a little extra money during the holidays than perhaps we should. You can take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no monthly or maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Chimes helps with fee-free overdraft up to $200. Your next deposit is applied to your balance. You get spotted on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals. There's no monthly fees or maintenance fees, and over 50,000 fee-free ATMs you can access to get your money out. They also have Spot Me, which is a great little feature where you go and set up a direct deposit in your Chime account of $200 or more. Chime will notify you to enroll in Spot Me. And with Spot Me, you can get spotted up to $200 on debit and credit card purchases and cash withdrawals, and your next direct deposit will be applied directly to your negative balance. They never charge overdraft fees for using Spot Me. Enjoy the holidays while keeping your financial goals on track with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Members FDIC. Spot Me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Direct deposit timing depends on submission of payment file. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in Spot Me and are subject to monthly limits. Fees applied out of network ATMs and for OTC withdrawals. Back at it here on your Thursday show, looking ahead to a Raptors Thunder game tonight. Raptors against the Western Conference. It's the West is tough out there. It's nice to get a schedule full of Eastern Conference bunnies because do not envy those who have to play the Western Conference every single night. Of course, the Mavs coming up Saturday as well. They're playing very well. But let's turn our attention back to the Eastern Conference, shall we? The Eastern Conference. Have you seen it? It's bad. There are some stinky teams and some more proof of their stink last night around the NBA. You get the Pacers getting waxed again by the Brooklyn Nets, who are maybe the most potent of the teams currently in front of the Raptors, going up to maybe the 8th seed, I guess, is kind of where you'd do the drop off to sort of that tier of teams the Raptors occupy right now. And the Nets are certainly a team that's going to pull the shoot at some point. Like, this is not a team that wants to win, I don't think. This is a team that feels just kind of waiting for December 15th to happen so they can start shipping dudes off and racking up lottery points, because that's the state the Nets franchise is in. They're 10-13 right now, but I don't really think they're long for being in the play-in. I think this is a team that wants to be bad and wants to fall down. Mentioned the Pacers, losers of 4 straight. They're a mess. And I think we're not far off, frankly, from Miles Turner trade wins starting to percolate. He's a pending free agent. He's clearly not helping matters there right now. He's just not the same defender he used to be. We saw it in person on Tuesday with like RJ Barrett just sizing him up and walking him in the half court, scoring. The rim protection, not the deterrent it used to be with Miles Turner. He's a good player, but on that Pacers team, I think they need something a little bit more. They just need a little more beef on the inside. They need wing defense too. Obviously, that would help matters as well. No Aaron Nesmith hurts them, but they're just not looking like a particularly good or functional basketball team right now. And with Tyrese Halliburton being the sort of diminished version of himself, that's not helping matters either. Like, we love Pascal Siakam. We've seen in recent years what Pascal Siakam, as the best player on a faulty roster, can do for you. And it's what the Pacers are doing right now. And so, it's not great in Indiana. And I don't feel scared when I look at Indiana as a team the Raptors have to jump here. The Pistons have lost 3 games straight. Their defense is kind of coming back to earth after being basically top 10 to start the year. They're down to 17th. They're reeling a little bit. I think as much as Cade Cunningham is sort of looking the part, I would take Scotty Barnes and what we're seeing from him over Cade Cunningham all day long. The defense he brings to the table is, like, I think substantially better. The playmaking is very much, I think, on par. And I think I just, the efficiency's been better from Scotty lately as well. I'm in Team Scotty in the Scotty versus Cade thing. And then after that, like, the supporting cast for the Raptors is just a lot better than what the Pistons have. I know Jaden Ivey's looked good, but after that, it's a lot of Tobias Harris. It's a lot of Tim Hardaway, a lot of Malik Beasley. And I just think the Raptors dudes are better than that. I think they're more effective. I think they're more two-way viable. And so I'm not worried about the Pistons. Like, they're 9-15 now, same number of losses as the Raptors in the loss column. Like, they feel eminently jumpable for a Raptors team that's playing much better basketball. You look below the Raptors, like the Hornets don't scare me at all. They're 6-15. They're terrible. They've lost 6 in a row. LaMelo Ball's been hurt. And even when LaMelo Ball's in, they're not a particularly serious basketball team. You know, he'll get them to some wins at times because he's super talented, but he's kind of a disaster. The Sixers are an enigma. I don't know. Like, they're 5-15. They feel like they should at some point make a rise up the standings, but they also have a top 6 protected pick. Maybe Daryl Morey sees the potential of that in a lost season and says, yeah, well, Joel Embiid, maybe we just shut him down. It's hard to say. we have no idea what's actually going to happen with the Sixers as far as like health. That's also dependent on Embiid. Paul George as well. He's 34 years old. He's got creaky knees. Like, I don't know if I trust the Sixers to have their three guys at all times this season for any sort of reasonable extended stretch. And if they don't, I think the rest of their roster is so bad that it's going to be really hard for them to climb out of the hole they've dug for themselves. And they might just kind of make the decision, you know what, this is too much. We're going to have to play these guys 40 minutes a night to just get back into the mix. We can't be playing Joel Embiid 40 minutes a night right now. This is too much. And so maybe they just kind of take a gap year and come back next year with a high pick and Jared McCain and a revitalized and hopefully fresh Embiid and Paul George, and they make an earnest go at it next year. Wasting years of Joel Embiid never feels super wise. They did it last year, just kind of doing the cap space game, and I think it's going to end up biting them. It's the Sixers are weird. They could totally pass the Raptors. They're more talented at the top end for sure, but I also think their sort of in-season intentions might shift here if they keep on losing, as they did last night to the Orlando Magic. And then ahead of the Raptors again, you got the Chicago Bulls. They are probably going to trade Vucevic or Levine or both at some point. They're going to keep on playing Josh Giddey, who is like maybe the single most damaging rotation player in all of basketball between what he thinks of himself and what he actually does on the floor. The gap there is like enormous. It's like Jordan Poole level ridiculous. It's just like this outsized opinion of what he is as a player. It's just not cutting it. And I just don't think the Bulls have a lot of staying power. They're 9-13. They should be trying to be bad. It's really the Heat and Hawks that kind of are where the Raptors, I think, will bump the ceiling against. And those two teams, I think they're just going to keep on humming along basically at the 500 clip they've played at. The Hawks are playing really well right now. They won 5 in a row. Jalen Johnson looks like the truth. Looks like the best player on the Hawks, which is kind of crazy considering Trae Young's been so domineering there for years. But Jalen Johnson, nudging Trae Young down to second banana duty, it's been pretty effective. It's looking all right. And Quinn Snyder, good coach. Dyson Daniels, a maniac. The Hawks are pretty good. I think they're going to be tough to catch. And so if we're talking about like ceiling for the Raptors in the East, there's a world in which the Hawks or the Heat kind of fumble or both of them fumble and kind of, lose steam and go on a bad run of form, and the Raptors can catch up. 4.5 games is a lot, though, for the Raptors to try to cut into. And so I don't think 6 is really on the table at this point for the Raptors, barring some crazy unforeseen injury, which obviously is a thing that can always happen. But I do think like 7 or 8, certainly on the table. And I know the tank crowd will be upset about that. But if the Raptors are getting to 7 or 8, because Scotty Barnes is playing the way he's played since coming back, 24, 9, and 8, 57% true shooting, absolute world record on the defensive end. Like if he's doing that and dragging this team to an 8 seed, that's good. That's to be celebrated. I know there's this sort of idea. I know Michael Grange had a piece that some people had issue with yesterday at Sportsnet of like Scotty being so good is actually bad for the team. And that's just not true. And I don't subscribe to that philosophy at all. If Scotty Barnes is telling you, we're good, I'm the number one, we're going to be fine with me driving this bus, then the need for that type of guy in the draft is a little bit less. Sure, it's always nice to add more talent, but eventually a team's going to tell you what they need, where they're at. And if the team is telling you, yeah, Scotty's amazing, RJ working off of him is like a 60+% true shooting guy again, who can't be stopped at the rim. And we're doing this without Immanuel Quickley and Gradey Dick, who are both going to bring this injection of offense and space and secondary playmaking to the mix. Like there is a lot of reason to think the Raptors can earn their way to a 7 or 8 seed in the Eastern Conference. That makes you feel good about what they've done. They're not going to fall ass backwards into a 33-win 8 seed. That doesn't feel like it's going to happen here. And so, yeah, as much as you'd like to, add a high pick, maybe they get the lottery karma, right? I'm a big believer in lottery karma. If you try to tank intentionally, very often you're falling 1 to 5 because that's what the gods of the lottery think you deserve. If you're the 9 or 10 team in the lottery standings, or you're 11 or 12, yeah, your chances of moving up higher or lower. Your chances of moving up higher are lower. But it's a trade-off of, well, the guys they've invested in and bet on have been awesome. So is it bad actually that they've done this? That's where it kind of it doesn't quite square for me. Is if the Raptors on their own merits, on the back of Scotty freaking Barnes, doing what Scotty freaking Barnes is doing, and the rest of the supporting cast looking as good and deep and sort of rich in talent and versatility as it's starting to look like, then yeah, like it's unquestionably a good thing if they go and win themselves into a play-in spot. That's like that's laying foundation to build on going forward. And there's also the element of, well, if they don't get a high draft pick, how do they get high-end talent? Well, all of a sudden they have like 13 good rotation players, a lot of them very young. There's so much trade possibility with this team as well. And so again, they have a hard stretch coming up here. The next 33 games on the schedule, super difficult. There's a very real possibility they just stay in the bottom 5 of the Eastern Conference and they get a high lottery pick and everyone who wants to tank is happy. But there's also a world in which they're just better than the teams in front of them. They have a better point differential than the Bulls, the Nets, and the Pacers. The Pistons are sagging, to say the least, and the Raptors are moving up. Like, it's the mobility is there for the Raptors to go from 12 to somewhere higher and a lot more interesting than where they're at right now. And if they don't, it's fine. Again, no lose season, baby. It's Hakuna Matata time for these Toronto Raptors, no matter the outcome. And if Scotty Barnes keeps on doing this thing, they're just going to win games because Scotty Barnes is playing like a star. We're going to come back on the other side, close things out with some thoughts on the WNBA team name release and announcement leak that was maybe forcing the announcement. Toronto Tempo. What do we think? There's my tease of how I feel. We'll get to that coming up in a second. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, #1 sportsbook in North America for a reason, baby. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Of course, it's not just the NFL. I'm not a football fan. I don't know anything that's going on in the NFL these days, but I do know that there's NBA games every night. There's hockey games every night. The WNBA season draws closer every day. And of course, maybe you want to throw some money down on a futures bet. Who's going to win the WNBA championship this year? Who's going to win the NBA championship or the MVP? Who's going to win the Hart Trophy in hockey? It's all there for you to go and peruse the odds for over at FanDuel. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Wrapping it up here on your Thursday Bits and Bobs episode of Locked On Raptors. And the last thing we'll hit on here today, the Toronto Tempo. The WNBA team's name and logo set has been announced. It's been revealed, and it's garnering mixed reviews, I would say, based on kind of the perusal of the online discourse. You know, that thing we all do to make our brains healthier, peruse online discourse. I'm not like a huge fan of the name Toronto Tempo. I think it's like, it's a little too cutesy for me. It's a little too, it's almost like the basketball is jazz thing. And look, the Utah Jazz is a great name for a basketball team. One in Utah, no, but like, I like that as a name for a basketball team, of kind of like evoking what basketball looks and feels like and sounds like and all of that. I get what they're going for here with Tempo. It's just like a slightly less good version of that to me. But like, you know, among all of the names in the WNBA, there are some stinkers out there. I think the Tempo was a little bit better than, say, the Connecticut Sun, who I believe are just named after the casino at which they play their games. That's no good. You know, there's lots of, like, Indiana Fever doesn't quite do it for me. There are a few ones that aren't great. I think it's still kind of probably a lower tier name overall within the WNBA. But look, I can't sit here and say I had many better ideas, right? Like, we can easily say that's bad, but I've yet to really hear a whole lot of pitches on what the name should have been. Naming a team is really hard, and you're trying to make a lot of people happy, and you're trying to, you know, do branding and make sure that the corporate people are happy. It's a difficult thing to sort of balance, and I do think they avoided some of the worst case scenarios here, which is like the happy angle of this, right? They avoided calling them some form of dinosaur thing in sort of having the derivative of the NBA thing. They're not the T-Rex. Thank God. They're not the Toronto Huskies. I know there was like a real sort of passionate faction of fans who were like, Toronto Huskies, just do it. It's a tried and true name. I never liked the idea of Huskies. I think it's like an elementary school ass team name. I say this because I literally went to a school that was the Huskies. It's an elementary school ass team name. college ass team name. There's just a lot of Huskies. The Yukon Huskies obviously are like the most famous Huskies. You want to be the second most famous women's basketball Huskies? No, I don't think you do. Also, I hate the idea of, well, let's just repurpose this name of a defunct men's team and apply it to the women's team. Like, no, like give it its own thing. And I'm glad that the Toronto team did that. I'm also stoked about the color scheme. If you haven't seen it yet, go to the Toronto, I think it's called Tempo Basketball is their Twitter account. You can see the whole color scheme, the very light sort of almost wintry blue and the maroon. Top-notch color scheme to me. I love the match of those colors. I'm someone who has watched a lot of Ottawa GGs and McMaster Marauders basketball, both for pleasure and for work over the years. And I think maroon, very underused color in sports. It's kind of unique in, North American pro sports. I think really the only one that has something similar is the Colorado Rapids of MLS, which yeah, fine. You're not exactly competing for eyeballs with that. And I just think maroon's going to pop nice. I think it's going to lend itself really well to nice jerseys. The contrast of the two colors is really nice. I think they nailed the color. It's hard to come up with something kind of unique. There's no totally unique color schemes in sports because everything's been used in combination because there's a bazillion sports teams. But I do think you found a pretty good match. I mean, I guess like if you're like an Aston Villa fan or a West Ham fan, you're familiar with this this color matchup, and those jerseys, those kits, as they call them across the pond, are damn nice looking. And so, yeah, I'm pretty in on the color scheme. It does a lot of work for me, and it helps kind of minimize my feelings about the name being kind of mid. I don't love sort of non-pluralized sports team names all that much, although I did pitch and really stand for Toronto Smoke as the team name for the WNBA squad, knowing it was never going to happen because of the cigarettes and climate change connotations it evokes. But yeah, for the most part, not a huge fan of non-pluralized names, but I think Tempo, look, it's going to be fine. I'm not super thrilled about it. I think the sort of, this is the thing. I feel like every team name that gets announced would hit like 80% harder if it didn't also get accompanied by like the last PowerPoint slide in the presentation that was given in the pitch meeting at corporate. I don't need to know like the relevance of the 6 piano keys. We get it. Toronto, the 6 played out by now. We understand 6 was going to be involved in some way. You can look at the logo and see, oh, those are piano keys. Okay. Tempo, music. Okay, cool. Got it. Like, you don't have to have it over explained by corporate words and word salad. Like, you're fine. But they did that because, you got to be brand oriented. You got to be corporate. You got to, appease the big wigs and all of that. But yeah, I think overall, look, this is the thing. The name is meh until the name is attached to fun, cool basketball things happening on the floor. And then the name is just the name, right? Toronto Maple Leafs is an objectively really stupid sports team name, but I like the team. I own plenty of merch from the team because they're the team that I like and they're the team I've hitched my wagon to. Raptors was decreed as stupid to begin with. That was always dumb because Raptors are just cool, independent of the film Jurassic Park. Cool, mean dinosaur. Yeah, hell yeah. That's a great sports team name. They hunt in packs. Perfect. Great. Put it on a sports team. Make it a basketball team name. That's a winner 100 times out of 100, movie or not. And by the way, the movie's like maybe the best movie ever made. So it was never a problem for me. But yeah, it's going to grow on people because it's not so much about what the team is called and about what the team makes you feel. And the team is going to make us feel cool things, surely, once they're actually playing basketball in the 2026 season. So I can have my misgivings about it. No one cares about them. That's fine. I'm sure lots of people think it's bad and silly. And, why are you naming your team after a 1980s Ford model? I get it. All the jokes are funny. I'm like a 4 out of 10 on the name. I'm like an 11 out of 10 on the color scheme. So 7, 8. Okay. Yeah, we can live with that. It's fine. One way or another, really excited to watch Toronto Tempo basketball. It's going to be a thrill to have WNBA ball here and accessible. Coca-Cola Stadium. It's going to be awesome. It's just going to be a really cool thing, an infusion of awesome sports into the city that is really good with its sports and really gets behind its teams when they're good. Hopefully the Tempo are good and fun and have interesting players. I'm sure they will because there's just such a wealth of talent in women's basketball right now and not a whole lot of WNBA roster spots to fill them with. It's going to be great. I'm super excited, even though the name is a little bit meh. The colors, man, maroon. Give me some maroon and blue Toronto Tempo merch immediately. I'll probably really start to change my tune. Either way, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for hanging out. We'll be back again tomorrow with Katie Heindel little Toxic Positivity Friday, a little breaking down of the Raptors Thunder game, and a whole bunch more to close out your week. Thank you so much for rocking with the show. Subscribe. Newsletter is at the QR code on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Just go right through there to subscribe. You can also go to the link in the description. You can find me on socials, Blue Sky, Instagram, at Locked On Raptors, the Discord, link in the description of the podcast as always. And have yourself a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy Raptors Thunder. We'll talk to you Friday. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Ooh, baby.